If you are currently working in an industry that is not related to healthcare or the wellness field, but you would really love to make a change and start building a career in the health and wellness industry, and if you're like many people that I talk to, you might have some doubts about your ability to do that. So you might have questioned whether this is something that you can even do, or you might have thought things like, who am I to talk to people about their wellness because you don't have a background in it? And if that sounds familiar, then you definitely need to stay tuned for this episode. My guest today, Jenn Trepeck, she runs a thriving business in the wellness space and has a terrific podcast in the health and wellness space called Salad with a Side of Fries. But she didn't start out that way. In fact, Jenn started moving into the wellness field and started her company as a side hustle while she was working full-time in hedge funds in New York City. So the wisdom that Jenn shares in this episode can actually apply to anyone who is contemplating a career change but has some fears and hesitations that are holding them back, no matter what industry you're starting in and what industry you're looking to pivot into. But of course, it especially applies if you're feeling called to the wellness space. So without further ado, let's dive in. Now, you have had a really cool journey in your professional life. Like right now, you run a successful business in the wellness industry, and you've got this awesome podcast called Salad with a Side of Fries, which I love that name. But you don't originally come from the wellness industry, right? Like, in fact, you started your professional career in hedge funds. So I would absolutely love to just like jump straight on in and talk about your origin story. Like, how did you get involved? Well, how did you start in hedge funds and the corporate 9-to-5 world? Tell me about that part first.
Yeah. So I actually started, going back, graduating from high school, going into college.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Michigan. I knew I was going to the University of Michigan. And I thought I wanted to major in like communications or something.
Okay.
And then there was something about the business school that was really interesting to me. And I thought I wanted to do like PR for like big companies. So at the time, the undergraduate business school program was 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so you applied at the beginning of your sophomore year to start in your junior year.
Okay.
So I literally changed all my classes to take all the prerequisites for the business school. And got into the business school. My parents are both accountants, so sort of like the business side of it. Although I had a C in my accounting class, so that's, another conversation. But, it was like the only C I think I ever got in my life that was like a final grade.
Funny.
I was mortified, but whatever, it was fine. So I got into the business school, studied marketing and organizational behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And I did the typical like brand management thing of what those companies recruit for. I joke that I was like the bastard child at the business school because I wanted to go onto the agency side of marketing versus the client side of marketing. And ad agencies do not hire kids out of business school. Like they don't really care about that degree. And the way ad agencies work, it's like they get the work and then they go hire the team. Right.
Okay.
So it wasn't like in business school, these companies come recruit you and you're given a job 6, 8, 9 months before you're ever going to start. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want to do that. So I graduated without a job. And it was like, one of a handful of people in the business school, right, who graduated without a job.
Mm-hmm.
I moved to New York and had a job at an ad agency within like 10 days.
Nice.
I started like 2 weeks after moving to New York. So it was an ad agency that specialized in catalogs, and I was like bored to tears. So, and more just bored because I think, first of all, I was overqualified. So like the learning curve, it wasn't as much of a learning curve in certain ways.
Right.
And then the other side of it was, like when you're in college and things change every 3 months, you're learning completely different things.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, still the same thing, another day. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
So I started studying for the GMAT because I was like, well, if I'm going to do what I think I want to do, I should probably get my MBA, even though my degree was what's called a BBA. It's an MBA in undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
Anywho, I started studying for the GMAT. I was doing all of these things. I ended up in my day job going in-house with one of my clients. So I worked at an agency, then I sort of did the creative thing for one of my clients. And I had started my health coaching practice on the side
Mm.
in that time frame. So what happened was, like, simultaneous to all these things, I was having my own, I call it a saga of weight management, trying to figure out,
Uh,
you know, how to eat, what to eat, you know, all those things.
mm-hmm.
So, I mean, long story short, essentially those things collided. I found the curriculum that I based my entire practice on. And I was like, okay, this is my thing. This is what I'm going to do on the side. So I started working with, a couple clients, nights and weekends. And as a photo shoot producer, a model that I worked with was doing like investor relations support, administrative support for a hedge fund.
Okay.
And at the time, as a photo shoot producer, I'm traveling easily, basically out of commission from my own life for like a month at a time,
Hmm.
essentially every 2 to 3 months. Like, at the time, I wasn't adept at, like, how do I keep the momentum going when I'm, off doing this other thing, right? So he said to me, this model, he goes, "You should really come work at this hedge fund." He's like, You wouldn't have to travel anymore. You'd probably make a lot more money. And, like, you could do this job with your eyes closed." And I was like, "Well, is there a job?" And he's like, "Well, no." And I was like, "Okay, cool. Thanks. Let me know when there actually is an opening." And he did. He called me one day. He was like, "You have to come for an interview now." I was like in jeans and a t-shirt. And I was
Uh-huh.
like, "What? You want me to This is not what one wears to an interview." You know?
Yeah.
He was like, "I promise it won't matter. Like, just come." I was like, "If you say so." I don't know.
Oh, like he meant
Uh,
now, like not
right.
in
Like,
half an hour, like right
legitimately,
now.
like, now. Right. Um, which also, looking back, red flag, should have known it
Mm.
then, but, you know. Um, but it's funny, I mean, in business school, I mean, I sort of hated my finance classes, but it made more sense for me to end up in the hedge fund than, like, as a photo shoot producer,
Mm.
you know?
Right.
But I was willing to take that role because I was focused on my business on the side. I was focused on wellness. I was like, I don't know how long this is going to take. I don't know what this is going to look like, but if this job pays me more and lets me have more time to do my stuff, like, it sounds like a win,
Right. Right.
And
Hmm.
then I worked in hedge funds for like almost 12 years before I went full time into my own practice.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you actually stayed in that for 12
Yes.
years. Okay. So there must have
Yes.
been some features of that were actually working for you then to stay in
Well, the
that.
money
Yeah.
works, right? I mean,
Yes.
it's golden handcuffs,
Yeah.
battle pay, whatever you want to call it, right? There's an allure to it. And I was able, to do both. And I was like, I'm single. I don't have kids.
Mhm.
Why not keep collecting on both sides until that's no longer sustainable,
Yeah. That's really
right?
smart. Really smart.
And it turned out to work to my advantage, because then by the time I left, I had also set it up such that I didn't have any of that desperation
Mhm.
that I think can sometimes happen when we take that leap, but we're really still unsure.
Yeah. Yeah. You mean like, and specifically you're talking about like the financial desperation, like
Sure.
I,
Yeah.
because,
I
yeah.
mean, and because I think sometimes that financial desperation translates into the energy of talking to a potential client.
Hmm.
They feel that. And I just think there's like a few things less attractive,
Yes.
even energetically attractive than, that desperation.
I totally agree. Totally agree. Because people can sniff that out. They sense
Yes.
it really easily. They might not be able to actually put their finger on it. But if you are coming to like a sales call or a conversation or whatever with that desperate energy of like, I need this client, just financially, because my rent is due, my
Right.
mortgage, whatever, then
Right, whatever it
it's
is, or
not going to be
if you're
good.
working for another company and you
Yeah.
have a quota and whatever, and you hit it right on the head, it's like, "I need this." It
Hmm.
turns the conversation from being about them to being about you,
Exactly.
and in the wellness world, this isn't about us.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Okay, this is so fascinating. So you actually started to find your way in the wellness industry quite early. Like this was a
Oh, yeah,
clear
this
it was a
is
clear passion for you. It's not like you had been in the trenches in like business and finance for years and then discovered that you really had a passion for wellness. You actually had a passion for wellness. It sounds like really at an early stage from your own personal journey, and then you kind of like worked things around in your environment and your career so that you could support yourself as you were growing up, your like growing into your wellness career. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure, exactly, and it's interesting too because I had an interest in this industry, but it was more it's funny, I almost, like I feel weird using those words because more than anything, it just felt like a passion for people to get this information.
Hmm.
It was like, I learned this and it completely changed my life, and I believe everybody deserves this information, and so I'm on a mission to help make that happen.
Yeah. That's such a common thread. I hear that all the
Yes.
time, like every day about this industry in particular really
Yes.
attracts people who just feel that like it's a total drive to actually share the things that you've learned and that you've experienced that have completely changed your life. But then you don't want to just keep it to yourself. You want
Right.
to share it with as many people as you possibly can and to really help other people. And it's a real like calling in a sense to actually help other people in this way. So I love that.
Absolutely. And it's funny too, because like they always say, right? Like you live, what is it? You live life looking forward, but you can make sense of it looking backward or connect
Mm.
the dots looking back,
Mhm.
whatever the phrase
Yeah.
is. Um, and it was interesting because so I had started my practice, but I was still working in these hedge funds. And so I started coaching late 2007.
Okay.
So this was also, first of all, this was before side hustles were a thing. My friends were
Right.
like, "Why
Yeah,
can't you
what
come
are
to the
you
bar?"
doing?
Right. And
Right.
it was before health coaching was as big as it is. People were
Yeah.
like, "What do you do?"
Yeah. I
And
can
then the other piece of it was I ended up in like 2015 in crazy adrenal fatigue.
right.
So even as much as I knew there was more to learn and more to figure out, right? And sort of burning the candle at both ends, as they say, or whatever that phrase is, and all of those pieces to then progress and it impacts everything. It informs everything I do now. I mean, working the hours that I did, I also did this, right? Lived this life for over a decade, eating out 3 meals a day. So when
Mhm.
someone says to me, "I don't like to meal prep," I'm like, "Cool, me either." I don't even have groceries, like, you know? So
Yeah.
it's so interesting the way, right, everything comes together and makes sense that, like, all these things I was experiencing over here completely informed what happens in my practice to be able to help my clients.
Totally. And the other beautiful thing about that is that you didn't have it like all figured out with this absolutely perfect lifestyle.
No.
You were still making mistakes or doing things that were maybe not as supportive of your health and well-being as they could have been. And it's okay. Like you can
Yeah.
learn alongside of functioning in the industry and helping other people. This is definitely another barrier that I find that a lot of people have, is feeling like, well, I have to get myself sorted out perfectly first, and then I can help other people with their health and wellness because otherwise I'm a fraud. And I've heard, I mean, so many people are
Yeah.
like, I need to lose my last 10 pounds before I can do this, or I need to do this before I can help anyone else. It's just simply not true. And I love that you're an example of that.
Yeah, and the thing that I remember, I think it was one of my coaches or mentors said to me, like, they actually wanna see themselves in you, the client,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And there's something incredibly relatable to say, "Yeah, I'm still working, right? But we can lock arms and do it together."
Yes.
right? I'm a couple steps ahead. I got some answers. I don't got them all.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a piece of it too. Like, one of the best phrases that I learned to say to a client is, "That's a great question. Let me get back to you."
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like, we don't have to have all the answers. I also work in my practice with a lot of other doctors. And so I'll say to them, I'll say to a client, "Okay, I have a couple of ideas, but before I say anything, is it okay with you if I confer with one or two of my colleagues and
Right.
then come back to you?"
Yeah.
And they're like, "Yes, of course, absolutely."
Yeah, nobody's gonna say no to that, but I feel like especially when you're beginning
Yeah,
in a new role, a new position, you think that you have to have all the answers and it has to just be you, that there's really no room for saying, "I don't know," or "I'm gonna have to look into that," or "I need to talk to somebody and I'll get back to you."
right.
It takes a certain amount of confidence in yourself to be able to do that, but that comes with practice too. But I love that. And I think
Yeah,
you're 100% correct, is that like you're a much more relatable coach, better than somebody who's like on a pedestal and the absolute picture of perfection. It's hard to relate to somebody who's like that. And how long ago was it
right.
that they actually were dealing with any of the same
If they ever
challenges that,
did.
yeah, exactly. And so how much are they going to actually be able to empathize with what's going on for me? So definitely for anyone who is listening or watching, just be reassured that you do not have to have it all figured out. And it's okay, like, for you to be still on the journey. Wellness is a journey.
Yes.
It's not a destination. It is a never-ending journey. So it's okay.
Exactly. I call it like the false finish line, that
Yeah.
as soon as you think there's like some sort of finish line, like, it doesn't actually exist, because we're ready to learn the next thing or go a little deeper here or tweak this thing. Like, it's just like life, right?
Yes.
Even in our careers or in the things that we want to do, like,
Yeah.
that idea of the end, like, it doesn't actually exist.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. So then you did actually make the change. So for a long time you were doing both, right? Like
Yeah.
you were working in hedge funds, you were building up your health coaching and wellness business, and then obviously something changed, right? Like you went full time in your wellness career. Tell me about that. Like, when did that shift happen?
Well, so backing up, I want to let people know that was the opposite of a straight line. Right?
Yeah.
Those 12 years were ups and downs, times I was doing a ton for my business and times I was doing nothing.
Mm.
Where I was like, "Are you a health coach if there's never a client?" Right? Like, right? Like,
Philosophical questions.
right. But like, there were times where this piece was blowing up and I had nothing left in me to give to this piece or whatever it is, right?
Right.
So, to be clear, it was never a straight line, and there were an innumerable number of times that I contemplated giving up and
Mm.
quitting.
Mm.
And the conversation I would have with myself on that over and over was always the same. It was, "Okay, give it up, throw in the towel, stop doing that." Then that means that I am choosing this job for the rest of my life. And that I know I definitely don't want, right? Like, that's
Mm.
not the choice.
Mhm.
So if that's not the choice, then there's got to be something else that I'm working toward or building or doing something else. And what would that be if not this?
Hmm.
Oh, okay. Well, let's just keep plodding along then, right? It's like, but I would talk myself through that sometimes 3 times a day, right? At times, or whatever was needed. But it's like, that was the thought process of
Right.
like, okay, I could throw in the towel. That's a choice I could make. And
Mhm.
then what? Right? Where do I go? How does this evolve? So I knew I was going to be leaving my full-time job. So it was 2016-ish. I left one hedge fund, took some time, and then went to another one.
Mm.
And my intention was to shift the balance between their stuff and my stuff. Like,
Mhm.
inevitably, when you're with an organization for a long time, like, more and more ends up on your plate and you're like, hold on, right? It's more challenging to sort of change the rules than it is to just start over and create new rules,
Right.
right? So I ended up at a different hedge fund. And I remember walking in there and I was like, I do not belong. Like, I do not meet the profile of who they typically hire.
Mm.
I don't think I'm going to be here very long, but let's see what happens. Right. And it was one of those where um, I had underestimated the cost on my business of having to prove myself again in a new organization.
Mm.
So, my old job, there were still some liberties that I took that I was able to do because I had a reputation there. People knew.
Yeah.
Starting over somewhere, I didn't have that. And I really underestimated what starting over in that way would look like for my practice. So in that moment too, when I was like, I don't think I belong here, I also realized that it wasn't going to serve my purpose to leave again.
Mm.
Right? That like, if I'm going to take my end goal and keep that as where we're headed,
Mm-hmm.
starting over again somewhere else a
In a
year
new
later
hedge fund,
isn't
right?
right. And then, so I was like, all right, let's just figure this out. And things there had shifted where I was like, okay, this is a little more sustainable. Fine. I figured out my way. Um, but I knew I was going to be leaving, like, my last day was like the end of June of 2019. And I had a few months of like, we were on the same page about like what my last day was going to be. And I'd gotten into listening to podcasts.
Mm.
And I had been thinking about starting a podcast because I was like, I can talk to a doorknob for an hour. Like, why not? You know? And at the time, I didn't even know what the podcast was going to be about. I was just going to start a podcast because I don't know what to do with free time, right? Like, my intention when I left there was, for the first time ever, I'm just going to focus only on my wellness business for a couple months and see what happens.
Yeah.
And when I remember, like, it was a couple months later, the headhunter called me, or it was like a couple days after I left, the headhunter called me that I'd been working with, and he was like, "You ready?" And I was like, "No, sir." You know, I was like, "I need some time."
Yeah.
He called me in September and he was like, "Here's what I got. You ready?" And I was like, "No, sir." You know?
Nice.
But it was one of those of like, I didn't ever make the choice for forever. I feel like I'm still not making choices for forever. I think one of the biggest things is that nothing is permanent unless we decide it is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm also just going, all right, here's what I know this looks like right now and maybe next week, and then we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you just gave yourself permission for that because I mean, so many people are just blocked by the feeling that like this is the decision and I can't change it and it's just going to be forever. And that's terrifying, of course,
Right.
and stops people from making those changes and trying something different and maybe changing direction. When you view it as like this is my forever change, then that's just way too much pressure.
I remember I started dating somebody and it was like real, right? Like it was like, wait, like this could actually be the person. And I remember saying to one of my mentors at the time, I was like, I have to tell you, like, it freaks me out.
Yeah.
Like, it makes me a little anxious. It's like I sort of then start to like, I don't know, my mind goes crazy. And she was like, so don't think about it as forever. Just think about it as like, okay, today it's good. Let's see how tomorrow is.
Yeah.
And that's I sort of took that approach to the relationship and was like, wait, it could kind of be like that with this too, where right now I'm focusing on my wellness business. I started this podcast. I was like, this is fun. Let's see what happens. You know, here we are like almost 4 years later, but I had no idea at the time, you know, that that's what it was going to be. And now I think there's sort of no going back
Mhm.
in certain ways, but I think the biggest thing is like, I just approach everything as like, I can always just choose again.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was actually the same. When I first left clinical medicine, I wasn't saying this is it. I didn't like light
Right.
fire to my license. Like I
Oh my
was
God.
not
Yeah.
saying it's over, never again. It was like I even just for my own mental sanity and maybe I was kind of deluding myself at the time, but I was willingly deluding myself. I was like I'm just going to see how this goes. And there's nothing that's permanent about this. And if it doesn't work for whatever reason, I can go back.
Right. Exactly. And it was I think the bigger shift was even then in recognizing too that just because I now had full-time hours,
Mhm.
it wasn't overnight going to turn the business into
Yeah.
full-time income.
Right, right, right. That's so important. And I think a lot of people put way too much pressure on that. Like, yes, just like exactly like you said, just because you've now given yourself full-time hours doesn't mean instantly it's because it's not a job where you get like the
Right.
salary and you get that like as soon as, the 2 weeks or whatever kicks
Right.
in.
And that's the piece too where like every day it was like, okay, who am I going to meet? What am I going to do? How am I going to build this practice?
Mhm.
To right? Because it's a lot different from something that's like nights and weekends to something that's like, okay, there's a mortgage to pay and there's,
Yeah.
utilities and there's
Yeah.
food and, you know,
Yeah.
it's a lot.
It is. It is.
It's a lot if we sort of get carried away
Mhm.
and lose the perspective. And so that's the other piece of going back to like the not desperate thing. I had set myself up so that it I knew it was gonna be a runway. I knew it was gonna take time
Mhm.
for the business to build, and so I set myself up for that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Little did I know the pandemic was around the corner, but that's another story, you
Right.
know?
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, that's so good. I love that. I love that you really it sounds like you very much approached it with a sense of play and discovery, right? Like let's see where this can go and like taking the pressure off. It doesn't have to be so heavy. It can be actually light and quite, just it's a journey again. Same way as
Yeah.
wellness is a journey. So that's cool.
I kept saying, like, I'm throwing noodles at the wall every day. We'll see what sticks.
Right, exactly.
And by the way, that is the process of entrepreneurship
Mhm.
and leading your organization and figuring things out. Like, I'm making it up every day.
Yeah.
You're essentially making it up.
Yep.
Nobody actually knows, right? We might have certain things that we know more because we've screwed it up before
Right.
or we've done this kind of thing in a different way before or whatever it is. But like, we're all making it up every single day. And hopefully, hopefully that like swipes the curtain away for anybody who's thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. Yet none of us know what we're doing.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, exactly. It's the same it's actually very similar to what we were just talking about with coaching too, right? Like it's
yes,
just
exactly.
nobody's up on a pedestal as much, and it's not that relatable anyway. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm curious like the podcast then. So obviously that with that extra time that you had carved out for yourself by not jumping back into another full-time corporate position, then you were able to start your podcast. And how has that been and what kind of difference has that made for your wellness business? Tell me about that.
I mean, it's tremendous and I love it. I love the conversations I have with people. I love the people that I get to meet. It really has turned into sort of like the top of the funnel, right? If we think about like the marketing funnel, the
Mhm.
podcast for me is like the top of the funnel. Having said that, I don't necessarily recommend everybody start a podcast in order to have a marketing funnel.
Yeah.
Like it is, as you know, tremendous. It is an entire business onto itself,
Yeah.
right? And because I don't know how to do anything like just part of the way, I'm also like weirdly involved in the industry and speaking at podcasting conference and doing all these things, which like is not
Yeah,
required.
no, but
But having said that too, I believe, for something like a podcast to serve the greater piece of your business, there are certain things it needs to have and do
mhm.
if it's going to be effective in, supporting your practice. And so I don't necessarily recommend that to everybody as the way to grow your practice.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's not like yes, if you want to grow a wellness business, you got to get yourself a
Yeah,
podcast
no.
mic and start podcasting. It's not that.
Right.
But that being said, it sounds like it's been really well, and it sounds if you were already like a podcast listener, you were loving them,
Exactly.
as once we discover this like Aladdin's cave of awesomeness that is the world of podcasting, and then immediately start thinking, "Ooh, how can I do my own?"
Yeah.
Which is how I ended up doing this too. But
Yeah.
yeah, but it's great. Like so you found it very helpful for that top of funnel, like attracting new people to you, and then that intimacy. I find it's such an intimate media, like that people really like, they're
Yes.
right in their ears. Like you really start to feel like you very much know this person who's talking to you on a regular
Absolutely. And
basis.
I will say, like, I take that responsibility mightily,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
I don't take that lightly. It means a lot to me. But having said that, what the podcast has allowed, and by the way, for somebody listening, like it doesn't have to be a podcast, but think about what you can put out there that could be this tool for you
Hmm.
because it allowed I've built my business 99.9% from referrals, right?
That's great.
So whether it's networking or clients or whatever, like I've never paid for advertising or promotion or something like that, right? For the
Awesome.
podcast or my practice.
Mm.
So what that means is, especially for me, like my specialty is weight management.
Hmm.
People aren't going to go up to someone and be like, you know what you need?
Yeah, that's not happening.
Right? No, nobody's gonna be like, you need to lose a few, and I know who you should talk to, right? So, what it means is that I'm not the easiest referral,
Mm.
but yet my business is 100% referrals.
Yeah.
So, what the podcast did is it created a really easy, like social norm way for people to share who I am and what I do.
Yes, that's such a good point.
Heard this and thought of you.
Yeah.
By the way, I know her if you want an introduction.
Right.
I teach people in my networking groups, I teach them to say that. Heard this and thought of you. By the way, I know her if you want me to connect you or if you
Mm.
want an introduction or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So it could be, I also write for Medium, right? So it could be a Medium article.
Mhm.
It could be a blog post. It could be your Instagram. It could be, right? Like, what is the tool that you create that makes for a really easy referral so that somebody can share who you are and what you do with somebody else? The other thing that happened with the podcast is somebody, maybe even a current client or a past client, would give my name to somebody.
Mhm.
They start listening to the podcast. By the time they call me, they've already made a decision to work with me. I'm just meeting them for the first time.
True. Totally true. Yes, because they've heard you, they've gotten to know you. They already feel a little bit like they know you, or sometimes a
I mean,
lot.
even the name of the podcast kind of gives
Yes,
away my
it
approach, right?
does. Yeah, it's
So,
perfect.
so people are like, "Yep, that's it. That's that thing." And
She's
I'm
my
like,
person.
"Okay,
Yeah.
right." Um, but what is that for you, right? Like, and by the way, I didn't totally see it as that when I started,
Hmm.
but I can see how it fits into everything now, you know?
Mhm.
And and then there's also ways to even monetize that piece separately from the rest of my practice too. And so it's added other streams of income to my practice as well. But it's about saying like I said, not everybody has to start a podcast, but what's the tool that you can use for someone to easily and effortlessly share you with their world?
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great way of, yeah, just it's food for thought there, because it doesn't have to be a podcast. It can absolutely be if you are feeling drawn to that, but something, right? Like something that makes you share worthy, referral friendly, all of that kind of stuff, discoverable.
Right. And like I said, it could be your Instagram. It could
Yeah.
be, a blog that you write. It could be,
Hmm.
a newsletter, whatever. Um, I think it's most important to find the thing that feels right for you, that you're going to enjoy doing,
Yeah.
rather than trying to like square peg, round hole, white knuckle
Yeah.
to what you think you're supposed to do.
Absolutely. And there's so many different ways of doing it that you don't have to
Yes.
feel like, a lot of people do get stuck in that trap of feeling like, well, I'm supposed to do this thing, even though I hate it. But if that's what's required, I
I
guess I'll
have
just
felt
like
that way
grit
about
my
email
teeth.
marketing.
Mm.
Confession.
Yes. Well, there's always parts that we don't love, but the beautiful thing about having your own business is that you can really, you know, just make it, structure it so that
Hmm.
you minimize the amount. You can delegate that stuff. You can
Right.
change your business model, do whatever you need to do to so that your work life is reflects your priorities and your skills.
Absolutely. And by the way, for anybody who's sort of coming from that corporate setting into your own space, like this has been coming up a lot lately. So I feel like I should say it here too. I worked for companies where, like, if you didn't respond to an email in like -7 seconds, they were looking for you.
Hmm.
So in my business, I struggle with letting that go. I
Mm.
struggle with, wait, like, responding 20 minutes later is not weird to anyone else. Like, even responding an hour later, oh my God, dare I respond tomorrow? Like, but when we send an email, we're okay if somebody responds tomorrow,
Mhm. Of course.
right? I have to constantly remind myself what I would think is weird if I was on the receiving end.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, I
Right.
wouldn't think
Yeah.
it's strange for someone to respond tomorrow. That's fine. So I need to learn to practice that.
You have to
And
retrain
the other
yourself.
thing is, yes. And the other thing is with deadlines,
Mhm.
with tasks, like, I remind myself, like, I made up the deadline. I can change the deadline. Like,
Exactly.
I made it up. And I'm a stickler for, like, consistency and, like, routine, and this is what I committed to, and this is the pattern, and there are people who are expecting, my Medium article to be published on this day, and it's like, you know what? They're really not.
Right.
Like, it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
And reminding myself too, right? I ended up in adrenal fatigue because I didn't allow myself. And now when it's my own business,
Mhm.
it's important to remind myself not to put myself there,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
Well, sometimes
Yeah.
we are a much harder boss on ourselves than
Oh,
we ever
yes.
had in a job, because our
Yes.
just expectations are just are unreasonable.
Right. And so I just, it's like, that's the thing. It's like reminding myself, like, I made up the deadline.
Mhm.
I can change the
Yeah.
deadline. The Medium article is not worth losing sleep.
Yeah.
Like, we all know the importance of
I
sleep,
know. Yes,
right?
exactly.
So I'm going to sleep.
Yeah. Good. Good, good, good. So, I mean, for people, if there's other people out there who are like listening, watching, and they are, working in an industry and they want to make that big shift into the wellness industry and make that same kind of transition that you made, what advice would you give them?
Um, this is such a good question, and I feel like it's loaded because there's a lot, and it
Yes,
sort of
there's,
all depends,
yeah.
right? Um, First, start now. Don't wait till there's never a right moment. There's never a
Mhm.
right time. There's never skies parting and the choir singing. Like, that doesn't actually exist. So start now. What can you do already on nights, weekends, whatever, right? And if you don't enjoy it enough to do it nights, weekends, whenever, it's probably not the thing.
Yes, that's
so
true.
that so that brings up the point of figuring out and dabbling and playing to
Mhm.
find the thing that does make it exciting to
Mhm.
do in that spare time.
Yeah.
Because I mean, and I help people become coaches. I help a lot of people, like, whether in wellness or other businesses. Like, I've been
Mhm.
doing some business coaching, and the biggest thing is we could follow every textbook, you know, but if it's not exciting to you, if you don't enjoy it, it's gonna feel just the same as your job in a lot of ways,
Yeah. At the end of the day,
and
that's what
yeah,
you'll just create another job that you don't like.
yeah.
Yeah.
And, like, you can be super passionate and be in this space and have it not be your career. So, there are pieces to this. I think the other thing that we're all sort of fed a load of bull in our lives around our jobs. Like, in America, like, we spend so much time working that we're also told, like, our life's fulfillment is supposed to come from our job. Like, that's a lot of pressure. Like,
Yeah.
what if, right? And so that was a big shift for me. It's like, okay, this job is for the money. My life's work, my mission, my passion is over here.
Mhm.
And that also, I think, can help shift. Like, for sure, it helped shift how much I got involved in the drama at work because mentally I was focused somewhere else.
Right.
And so that even helped sort of build the business on the side because I had something else going on. I didn't care as much about, like, the petty drama of whatever the office nonsense was that everybody was talking about, right?
Mhm.
Um, And so it's like figuring out that thing. Like, what do you get excited about? What can you not stop talking about? Or consider what you're already expert at. And not in terms of like tasks and your job and whatever, but like, what's the thing that everybody in your world comes to you for advice on
Mhm.
already?
Mhm.
What's the thing where if somebody said, I need to know about X, your friends would go, oh, that person, you, right? Think about those things where you're already expert and you talk about them anyway, and people see you as somebody who knows that, even though sometimes we don't see ourselves as that to start.
Mhm. Yeah.
Go in
That's
that direction.
Yeah, I love that. That's great advice. And I especially love your recommendation to start now because
Yes.
it's so it's heartbreaking, to be honest. So many people that I encounter and talk to who are just waiting. And of course it's so much fear that is stopping you
Yeah.
really from just getting started. And nobody needs to know in the beginning. You can just do it in your spare time. You don't need to make a big proclamation or anything. You can just, but starting now rather than waiting, because I have also talked to many people who just, it's such a common thing to hear people regretting the time that
Yes.
they wasted in just kind of thinking about it and waiting for perfect timing or for
Right.
certain things in your life to line up, which that never happens. And so just start now, even if it's just a little bit, if just baby steps, like just one little thing that you can feel like is moving you forward in forward momentum. It's going to be so much better than just waiting. Waiting's the
Yeah.
worst.
I mean, first of all, you don't, like you said, like you don't have to share it with anybody.
Yeah,
Start doing something for free for somebody who's willing to go on this journey with you a little bit and play around and see how it feels,
exactly.
you know? And then, right, so like dip your toe in the water when your life isn't dependent on it,
Yes, yes.
right? Starting now, playing with it, seeing what happens. And I think the fear, right? Play it out. Okay. What am I afraid of? Oh, that this isn't going to support me? Great. I don't need it to right now. What's next? Okay. Well, what if it doesn't work? Well, if it doesn't work, I'm still where I'm at right now,
Right.
right? Or whatever. But like, play it out. Think through all those things. Go through it with another person. Like, say all the things out loud and play it out.
Hmm.
Like, that's what I did when I would contemplate quitting. Okay, I quit. Play it out mentally. What do I do next? Oh, then I'm stuck in this job. Okay, well, I'm not going to accept that. So, right? Like just
Yeah.
go through the exercise to play it out because it's of course it's scary.
Hmm.
It's different and unknown. So why not tackle a little bit of the unknown before our livelihood depends on it?
Yes, so true. And really talking it through, like naming those fears rather than it just being
Yes.
some big, vague sense of like, oh, it's scary. But actually, like you said, play it out, talk it through, write it in a journal about it, whatever you have to do to actually name, well, what is the specific thing that I am worried about here? And then, because then you can actually challenge it, you can question it, you can really sort of work with it. But
Yeah.
that's when it's a specific thing that you're naming rather than just sort of this big, oh, it's too big and scary and I'm not really sure. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's great advice. We've been talking so much about wellness and wellness industry. I'd love to know, Jen, what are some things that you specifically do to support your own health and well-being, like physical or mental, emotional, like something. I'd love to give our audience just some ideas.
All the things, right? So I will say I start my day every morning with really high quality vitamins.
Mhm.
Get me going. I'm not a caffeine person, so I don't really have coffee in the morning. My vitamins get me going. Um, Before I go to bed, I do a gratitude journal. So 5 things I'm grateful for that day. Uh, 5 because it pushes me, right?
Right.
A lot of times
Yes.
people are like 3, 3 is easy. Go to 5. And if 5 is easy, go to 7, right? But like it forces finding the little things like, oh, the subway showed up right when I got down the steps.
Mm.
Or um, it didn't rain when I had to be outside, right? The little things that would go unnoticed if we weren't pushing ourselves. And the other thing about right before bed is it shifts what I'm thinking about, it shifts what I'm focused on, and then allows me to go to sleep and I'm not sort of running through that to-do list.
Right. Exactly.
I move every day,
Mhm.
and I will admit, since 2019, I have become a meditator. So, that helps too.
Awesome. That's
But
great.
before that, in hedge funds, I would have been like, I'm sorry, slow down. Sure.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh, yes. I'm sure that just
yeah,
even that shift of industry has changed a lot of how you just approach your days.
totally.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, those are some great things. I love just,
Yeah.
capturing a few ideas for people. So that's so
I
great.
love it.
Yeah, this has just been so fun. It's been such a pleasure to have you here and to have you walk us through that whole journey that you went on. Before I let you go, of course, tell us all about where people can go to learn more about you and connect with you and all those good things.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. I feel like we could talk for hours.
Yes.
So thank you. Um, Podcast, Salad with a Side of Fries.
Mhm.
Website is a salad with a side of fries.com. All social media, I am at Jenn Trepeck, JennTrepeck. Please send me a message. Like, I want to know more than anything. I love hearing from you. Like, I want to know what's sticking with you. What did you need to hear again? Or what was something you heard for the first time or whatever? Like, send me a DM, send me a message. I have I'm sure somewhere there's a link to book a discovery call, whether, business or wellness or whatever. And I'd love to chat with you.
Awesome. Yes, I will put
Yeah, we
all of
can
those
get you that
links.
link. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, send me all of that. Well, I do have a number of links for you, and I'll put all of
Yeah.
that stuff in the show notes. I'll make sure that people can easily connect with you and find you
Awesome.
and book a call with you if they would like to do that, if they're wanting to carry this conversation further, and all of those things. I hope that you enjoyed my chat with Jenn, especially if you have been sitting on the sidelines of the wellness industry for a while, feeling like an outsider looking in and wanting to take the leap, but not knowing how to get started. I really hope that Jenn's story has inspired you to just do it. Just get started. Just take those first few steps. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. The key is just getting started. I love career changers. If the career that you're in is no longer working for you, then I want to empower you to make the change now. It doesn't matter that you don't have a healthcare background or that you worked in a totally different industry. There are definitely ways that you can get started now and work your way towards an entirely new career for yourself. So I would love to know your thoughts, and I would love to hear if this episode resonated with you and what your big takeaway was. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and drop me a comment below this video, or if you're listening to the audio of this episode, then find me on Instagram and let me know. I would love to hear from you. Okay, that is a wrap for today. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you again very soon.